"Mommy, who is that man staring at us?" Three little girls sat quietly at a corner table, folding napkins and coloring, unaware that their innocent question had just shattered a man's entire world. Julian Carter wasn't a man who believed in fate. He believed in contracts, quarterly profits, and clean exits. That's why, when he ducked into a quiet little cafe in a heat wave, looking only for espresso and air conditioning, he never expected his past to slap him across the face. There, behind the counter, was the woman he left behind 10 years ago, and three little girls with the exact same eyes as his. But here's the thing about life. When you walk away from something, you don't always get to come back, especially when what you left behind kept breathing, growing, and eventually called someone else Dad. What if you found out you were a father years too late? Would you walk away again? Or would you fight to earn what you already lost? And what if the woman you once loved was now more afraid of your presence than your absence? This story isn't about wealth. It's about redemption, second chances, and three little girls who unknowingly gave a man his heart back. But will love be enough this time? Stick around, because the truth, you'll want to see how this one ends. Don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories channel for more emotional tales just like this every day. The summer heat pressed down on the city of Santa Lucia like a heavy blanket. Concrete shimmered, car engines roared with impatience, and the smell of hot asphalt mingled with the salty scent of the nearby ocean. Somewhere downtown, businessmen fought over mergers and lawyers scribbled down million-dollar decisions. But none of that mattered to Julian Carter at this moment. His driver had pulled up to the curb of a posh restaurant where Julian was scheduled to meet a team of European investors. It was the kind of place that served dishes you couldn't pronounce and bills that didn't blink twice at 4 digits. Julian didn't step out. Instead, he stared out the window, distracted, not by a call or an email, but by something simpler: the aroma of fresh-baked bread. There was cinnamon in it, and vanilla too. He rolled down the window halfway. That smell, it tugged at something deep in his memory, something buried. He gave a short, curt command. "Take me 1 block down, I'll walk the rest." The driver blinked, confused. "Sir?" "I said 1 block down." When the car rolled to a stop, Julian stepped out, buttoning his navy blazer, his shoes clicking against the sidewalk. His steps weren't hurried, but purposeful. He didn't know exactly why he was going there. Maybe hunger, maybe nostalgia, maybe fate. But a part of him knew he was walking into something he wouldn't be able to walk away from. He stopped in front of a small cafe with peeling green paint, lace curtains in the window, and a wooden sign that read, "Luna's Table." Not exactly 5-star, but something about it felt familiar, honest. He pushed open the door. Cool air greeted him like a whisper. An old Spanish guitar song played softly from the radio behind the counter. The scent inside wasn't artificial or overly perfumed. It was warm, real. Sugar, lemon, cinnamon, and the faintest trace of cleaning detergent. Home in a strange way. A group of students laughed in a corner, their backpacks piled like sandbags beside them. An old couple shared a croissant, feeding each other little pieces like it was still 1975. A man in his 60s typed furiously on a laptop, muttering to himself. And then, Julian saw her. She moved quickly between tables, carrying plates with quiet urgency. Her brown hair was pulled into a tired braid. There were creases around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her back was slightly hunched, not from age, but from exhaustion. But the moment their eyes met, everything else in the cafe blurred. Her name was Emily Russo. 10 years. 10 whole years since he last saw her, and yet he would have known her in a crowd of thousands. Her eyes still held that familiar fire, guarded, unreadable, and heartbreakingly beautiful. But it wasn't Emily that made Julian stop breathing. It was the table near the counter. 3 girls sat there, Not toddlers, not babies. Girls, maybe 6 or 7. Long dark hair, delicate features. One was drawing spirals on a napkin. Another was carefully lining up sugar packets like soldiers. The third, she was folding a paper flower, tongue pressed to her cheek in deep concentration. And all 3 of them had Julian's eyes. The same soft arch of the brow, the same color, green flecked with blue. Even the way they tilted their heads when focused. He had seen that in the mirror every day for 42 years. The world stopped. The cafe faded into silence. And Julian Carter, real estate tycoon, Forbes coverman, power broker, stood frozen, heart racing like a schoolboy's, staring at 3 little girls who unknowingly upended his life with nothing more than their existence. He took a shaky step forward, then another, but before he could say anything, before he could even find the right words, Emily turned. She had noticed him. Her face shifted from surprise to steel in an instant. She stormed toward the girls, gently placing herself between them and Julian. "Don't speak to them." Her voice was not loud, but it was sharp, final. Julian lifted his hands slightly, like a man approached by a wild animal. "Emily, Not here, not now." Her gaze flicked to the girls. "They're mine. And you don't belong here." It cut him, but he didn't argue. "Mom?" a quiet girl asked, tugging at her apron. Emily bent down and whispered something soft to them, and the girls returned to their napkins and crayons, casting curious glances over their shoulders. Julian swallowed hard. "Can we talk? Later?" "Why? So you can disappear again?" "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Emily looked him in the eye for the first time. "Half an hour. Bench outside. If I don't come out, don't wait." She vanished behind the swinging kitchen door. Julian sat in the cafe, not ordering, not speaking, barely breathing. He just sat, staring at the wooden floor, his own reflection flickering in the glass table. The same reflection he now shared, clearly, with 3 tiny strangers. Outside, the city carried on. Birds chirped, horns blared. Somewhere, someone was arguing over parking. But Julian sat on a splintered bench, knees bouncing. At exactly 30 minutes, she came out. No apron now, just a white blouse, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. A bottle of water in one hand, 1,000 unanswered questions in the other. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I'd talk, that's it." He nodded. "Those girls, they're mine?" She didn't speak, not at first. Then finally, yes. One word. That was all it took to knock the wind out of him. He shook his head slowly. "I never knew. Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried. I called. I emailed. I came to your office in New York. They said you'd moved to London, that you weren't taking visitors." Julian closed his eyes, ashamed. "I thought you moved on," he whispered. "I did, but not alone." Her voice cracked then. "Every morning, I make breakfast for 3 little girls who look like the man who left me." Silence. "Emily, I want to make this right." She looked at him tired. "It's too late for perfect, but maybe not too late for something real."
Julian Carter didn't sleep that night. He didn't open his laptop, didn't check his portfolio, didn't even return the dozen messages his assistant had flagged as urgent. He just sat in his apartment, staring out over the city skyline. The lights looked dull, the glass of bourbon untouched on the table beside him. It was the first time in over a decade he had no idea what to do next. 3 girls. His daughters. It was a truth so simple and yet so world-altering, it felt like gravity itself had shifted. The next morning, he called a private clinic. His voice, usually commanding and calculated, cracked. "I need a paternity test. Today, as soon as possible." He met Emily outside the clinic 3 hours later. She wasn't dressed up, just jeans and a gray cardigan, no makeup, hair in a loose bun. But her eyes held firm. She didn't ask why, because deep down, she already knew. Inside, the nurse was gentle. The girls were told it was just a fun checkup, nothing to be scared of. Julian sat with them, awkwardly at first, unsure how to exist in their orbit. But they were curious, fearless in the way only children can be. One of them, Lucy, the most energetic, climbed onto the seat beside him and asked, "Do you like dinosaurs?" He blinked, then smiled. "Love them, especially the ones with tiny arms." She giggled. "T-Rex, I'm a triceratops." And just like that, he was gone. The walls around his heart cracked. By the time the nurse took the final swab, Julian was telling them a story about how Triceratops and T-Rex once opened a bakery together. The girls were laughing. Emily, from the corner of the room, was watching, quietly. Not smiling, not frowning, just observing. 3 days later, Julian sat on the edge of his couch, envelope in hand. He hadn't opened it yet. He couldn't. He already knew, but knowing and seeing are different things. The moment the paper unfolded, it was there, in black and white. Lucy Carter Russo. Nora Carter Russo. Isla Carter Russo. 99.99% probability of paternity. Julian exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands trembled. The page slipped to the floor. He wasn't imagining it. This was real. They were real. He stared at the ceiling for a long time, the kind of stare that looks past the paint and wood and into the soul. For years, Julian had defined himself by what he built: hotels, resorts, luxury condos, legacy, empire. Now, in the span of a week, he'd discovered that the most important thing he'd ever created had been growing without him, quietly, beautifully, right under his blind spot. He met Emily outside her cafe after her evening shift. She was wiping flour from her forearm when he handed her the results. She didn't take them right away. "You already knew, didn't you?" she asked softly. "Yeah. But now there's no denying it, no way to pretend I didn't see it." She finally took the envelope, glanced at the paper briefly, then tucked it away. "I'm not looking for money," she said before he could speak. "We're okay. I work hard. I have help from my sister. We're not living in luxury, but the girls are safe, loved, educated. I'm not here to throw money at the problem, Emily. I'm here because I want to be part of their lives, not just a name on a birth certificate." She folded her arms. "This isn't something you fix with a few park visits and bedtime stories. I know. That's why I'm not asking for permission to drop in and out. I'm asking for a chance to stay." Emily stared at him long and hard. Julian didn't look away. Finally, she gave a slow nod. "One condition. Anything. You don't just come for them. You come for all of it. The crying, the fevers, the grocery store meltdowns. You come when it's inconvenient and when it hurts." "I will. I mean it. I do too." The following weeks weren't perfect, not even close. But they were real. Julian started small. Ice cream after school, drawing with them at the local library. He picked them up a few times when Emily was short-staffed. He learned Lucy loved to talk, Nora watched everything without saying much, and Isla was the quiet heartbeat, the one who held back until trust was earned. One night, while helping Nora cut colored paper for a school project, she looked up and whispered, "You don't smell like a dad." He blinked, then smiled. What did Dad smell like? She shrugged. Peanut butter and car seats. He laughed so hard he cried. There were setbacks too. He missed Lucy's music recital when a flight got delayed. He accidentally bought the wrong flavor of yogurt for Isla, who silently slid it aside and refused to speak to him for 2 days. And once, during a supermarket trip, all 3 girls decided to have a synchronized tantrum in the cereal aisle. Julian stood there, overwhelmed as strangers offered him judgmental stares or awkward sympathy. And yet, he didn't leave. He stayed, he calmed them down, he loaded the car, and then he cried alone in the parking lot. But he came back the next day, and the day after that. Slowly things shifted. Isla started reaching for his hand in public. Nora let him read her bedtime story. Lucy, always the boldest, began calling him Dad without hesitation, then pretending she didn't. One evening, as Julian was helping the girls make pancakes for dinner, Emily leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching. "You're not bad at this," she said. "I still burn toast. Well, they think you're a superhero. I'm just trying not to mess up again." Her voice softened. "You're doing better than you think." For a moment, Julian thought about reaching for her hand, but he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he flipped a pancake too high. It hit the ceiling. The girls screamed with laughter. And for the first time in years, so did Emily. Real-life insight. A friend of mine once told me she didn't meet her biological father until she was 11. She said the moment he walked into the room, she felt a connection she couldn't explain, but also a flood of resentment. She didn't want to love someone who hadn't loved her first. But over time, the man proved himself. He didn't come with gifts. He came with time, with patience. She told me, she said, he didn't ask for my forgiveness. He just kept showing up. And one day, I realized he was already family. Julian's journey wasn't that different. Because love, the kind that matters, is built brick by brick. Not on blood, but on presence.
Julian had just started believing that maybe, just maybe, he had a chance. He wasn't naive enough to think he could make up for lost time. But every time Lucy wrapped her arms around his leg, or Isla slipped her hand into his, or Nora looked up at him with that searching gaze that seemed to weigh his soul, he felt something click into place, something that had been missing for a long, long time. He didn't talk about business much anymore. His assistant, Julia, kept his calendar light. He skipped board meetings, delayed expansion projects. When his co-founder, Matteo, asked if he was having a midlife crisis, Julian just smiled. "If I am," he said, "this is the first time it's felt like living." But life has a way of testing our sincerity, and Julian's test came on a Friday afternoon. Nora was performing in her first school play. She had landed the lead role, a butterfly who finds her wings. Emily had told Julian weeks in advance. Nora herself had reminded him every time she saw him. "I'm going to fly," she whispered once, "and when I do, you have to wave." He promised he'd be there. Pinky swear. He even put it in 3 different calendars, set 2 alarms, bought flowers in advance. But promises don't hold up well against forgotten meetings and delayed drivers. That afternoon, Julian was on the wrong side of the city when his phone buzzed. He looked at the clock, blinked, and then panic slammed into him. He jumped into the car, begged the driver to cut through traffic. "Run lights if you have to," he said, breath shallow. But when he arrived at the school gate, it was empty. The children were gone, the stage taken down, just remnants of glitter blowing in the breeze. Emily stood under a stone archway, arms crossed. Her face was pale, still, unreadable. Julian began. "Don't say it to me," she said, nodding toward the parked car. "Say it to her." Julian's throat tightened. He opened the car door. Nora sat in the back seat, still wearing her costume. Shimmering wings bent slightly from the ride. Her makeup smudged, her face blank. He knelt beside the door. "Nora," she whispered. "I was a butterfly, but now I flew away." She turned her face toward the window. Julian didn't respond. What could he say? That traffic was bad? That work got in the way? Excuses are the currency of people who don't truly show up. That night, Emily didn't reply to his messages, didn't return calls, didn't answer the door. And Julian didn't blame her. It was Lucy who broke the silence. Just after midnight, Julian heard soft footsteps on the stairs of the apartment building. He had waited out front for hours. The night air clung to his jacket. The city buzzed in the distance. Then came the voice. "Daddy Julian." He turned. Lucy ran toward him barefoot, hair messy, her pajamas inside out. "Mom won't wake up," she shouted, her words tumbling. "She's on the couch and she's really hot." Julian didn't hesitate. He bolted upstairs, following Lucy into the apartment. Emily lay curled on the couch, her breathing shallow, skin pale and damp with sweat. A glass of untouched water sat beside her. Her hand twitched weakly when I called her name. "Emily," he whispered, kneeling down. "Stay with me, okay? I've got you." He scooped her up gently, her head lolled against his shoulder. He called emergency care, kept her cool, monitored her breathing. And when the paramedics arrived, he answered every question, held her hand through the IV, and stayed until her color returned. He didn't go home that night. He stayed. He bathed the girls, brushed Lucy's teeth twice because she insisted, tucked Isla's favorite bear next to her, and rocked Nora in his arms without a word until she fell asleep. And then, when the house was quiet, he returned to the living room. Emily was awake, watching him from the sofa. "You had a meeting tonight," she said hoarsely. "Not anymore," Julian replied. He sat beside her. "I'm here." She looked at him, then away. "I don't know how to do this with you." He nodded. "Neither do I, but I know I don't want to do it without you." There was a long silence, only the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Julian reached out, not to grab her, not to beg, but just to rest his hand near hers, a quiet offering, an apology, a promise. Emily didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either, but she let it stay. And sometimes, in the deepest kind of pain, that's enough. A few days later, Julian called a meeting with his executive team. They were expecting updates on the Milan expansion, the Singapore rollout, new investors from Zurich. Instead, he walked in, set his phone on the table, and spoke calmly. "I'm not resigning, but I'm stepping down from daily operations indefinitely." The room went silent. Someone dropped a pen. Someone else exhaled audibly. "This about those girls?" Matteo asked. He met his eyes. "They're not just girls. They're my daughters, and I'm starting to understand what that actually means." There were no applause, no grand speeches, just nods, respect, because for the first time, they saw the man behind the empire, and he was choosing family over fortune. 2 months later, Julian opened a new cafe, but this one wasn't downtown, It wasn't trendy or expensive or designed for investors. It was tucked in a quiet neighborhood near a park, with big windows, wooden tables, and a play corner filled with crayons and storybooks. He called it Trace, Spanish for three, not because it was his third business, but because it honored three names: Isla, Nora, Lucy. Emily walked through the doors during opening week. She held a cup of coffee, looked around at the pastel walls, the butterfly art on the back wall, Nora's favorite. "You really built this for them?" she asked. Julian didn't look away from the corner where the girls were laughing on beanbags. "I've built restaurants, brands, supply chains, but this is the first time I've built a life." Emily stared at him for a long moment. And then she smiled. Just a little. But it was real.
Autumn came softly to Santa Lucia. The sun still warmed the streets, but the wind had turned crisp, threading through the trees like a whisper of change. The girls were back in school, their backpacks now filled with sharpened pencils and hand-drawn stickers. Life had taken on a rhythm, familiar, fragile, real. Julian no longer lived in a penthouse with panoramic views and imported marble countertops. He had moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment 2 blocks from the girls' school. The walls bore faint marks of colored pencil drawings. The air often smelled of toast and peanut butter, and at least twice a week there were socks mysteriously wedged under the couch. He didn't mind. He woke early now, helped tie shoelaces, practiced reading flashcards, wrote out little notes for lunchboxes. He burned more toast than he cared to admit, but he also brewed hot cocoa with just the right sweet milk ratio, exactly the way Isla liked it. One morning, as he finished braiding Lucy's hair with a bright pink ribbon, she looked at him in the mirror. "You don't look like a boss today," she said. Julian paused. "Is that bad?" She grinned. "No, I'd like when you look like Dad." His heart stilled. The word lingered in the air longer than any business title ever had. That same morning, his phone rang. Julia, his longtime assistant, was on the line, voice brisk. "Julian, I know you didn't want interruptions, but the Swiss investors just read the new financials. They think you redirected your entire business model. They're asking questions." Julian didn't answer immediately. He was crouched down, tying Nora's shoelaces outside the school gate. "Tell them," he smiled, "tell them my business is under new ownership." That afternoon, the school held an art exhibition. Each student had drawn their dream home. There were castles, rocket ships, jungle tree houses, and in the center of it all was Nora's piece. A small orange house, 3 little girls in different colored dresses, and a man wearing an apron, holding a frying pan, grinning ear to ear. Below it, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Where Daddy doesn't work, he stays home." Julian stood silently in front of it, hand over his mouth. Emily came up beside him, holding a paper cup of apple cider. "She worked on it for 2 weeks, she said softly. "She nailed it," Julian replied. They didn't say anything else for a while, just stood side by side, watching Nora blush as other parents complimented her drawing. Later that night, back in the apartment, Julian was packing school lunches when Emily walked into the kitchen. Her hair was slightly messy, the kind of messy that only comes from wiping crayon off walls and wrestling with 3 kids under 10. "You're getting used to waking up at 6 yet?" she asked, sipping tea. Julian glanced up. "I've never been happy like this before." She leaned on the counter. There was something different in her eyes. Not guarded, not suspicious. Something still, curious, open. A few days later, Julian sat at the counter of Tress, sipping a coffee he didn't really need. The girls were in the corner, building a pillow fort. Emily was helping a customer near the register. He watched her. The way she wiped her hands on a dish towel.
The way she tilted her head when a child spoke to her. The way her smile had returned, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a mosaic rediscovered. He stood up, walked behind the bar, and waited for a quiet moment. "Walk with me?" he asked. Emily raised her eyebrow. "Julian, we're in the middle of life. But I want to walk into the next part of it with you." She stared at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. They stepped outside, leaving the soft noise of the café behind. The wind rustled the trees as they made their way to a quiet clearing in Casanet Park. It wasn't fancy, just a patch of grass, a few benches, and the faint sound of birdsong. He laid down a blanket, pulled out orange juice, cookies, and a tiny speaker playing soft jazz. Emily sat beside him. They didn't speak at first. Then, after a while, she said, "Did you ever think we'd sit like this again?" He shook his head. "No. I thought I'd lost all of this." She looked at him. "Maybe losing it helped you see what was worth keeping." He nodded slowly. Then he turned to her fully, eyes sincere. "Emily, can you give me another chance? Not to start over, but to continue this." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached for his hand. And sometimes that's louder than any yes. They didn't have a big wedding. There were no string quartets, no champagne fountains, no glossy announcements. Just a backyard ceremony behind Tress. Under a white arch decorated with paper flowers the girls had made themselves. As Emily walked down the aisle, Lucy whispered to her sister, "Now it's official." Lucy nodded solemnly. "We're forever now." The vows were simple, quiet, spoken more with looks than words. Afterwards, they ate cold pizza on the cafe floor, the girls sprawled across both their laps. Julian stroked Nora's hair. He whispered, "Now I don't just come home on time. I come home to my wife." Emily smiled sleepily. "You big sap." And for once, Julian Carter, the man who once built empires and chased ambition like a storm, knew what it meant to arrive.
There's a quote I once heard that never left me. Your legacy is not the money you leave behind. It's the time you give when no one's watching. Julian could have stayed in his old life. He could have kept chasing accolades, headlines, applause. But in the end, what mattered most was a drawing taped to a school wall, a pink ribbon on a cereal bowl, the sound of little feet running down a hallway. That's the thing about family. You don't build it in boardrooms. You build it in moments, in bedtime stories, in pancakes on Sundays, in showing up, especially when it's hard. And as Julian once told Emily, "I used to think legacy was about what I leave behind, but now I think it's about who I leave it with."
The first snow came early that year. Not much, just a thin shimmer over the rooftops and a sprinkle on the sidewalks, but enough to make the city feel quieter, softer, like everything was holding its breath. Julian stood by the window of their apartment, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that Nora had decorated with stickers. The house was still. Emily was in the kitchen, humming. The girls were asleep in a blanket fort made of dining chairs and 2 bed sheets. He didn't need anything more. Later that morning, as they bundled up to walk to the school holiday event, Lucy tugged at Julian's coat. "Can we have pancakes when we get back?" "You got it," he smiled, adjusting her scarf. "No burnt ones," she added. "I make no promises." They laughed together, and that sound, so light, so pure, wrapped around Julian's heart like a thread of gold. When they arrived at the school, the hallway was lined with student artwork again. But this time, the theme was "My Favorite Place."
Julian walked slowly past paper mountains, cardboard rockets, beach scenes, and magical castles. Then he stopped. There it was, Isla's drawing. A messy living room, crayons scattered on the floor, a dad cooking in the kitchen wearing an apron that read, "Super Toast Burner." 3 girls were laughing. A mom was smiling, holding a mug. The caption in shaky handwriting said, "My favorite place is where all my people are." Julian felt his throat tighten. He didn't cry, but something deeper stirred. Not sadness, not even joy. Something closer to peace. That evening, as the girls dozed off in the living room watching an old holiday movie, Julian opened his laptop for the first time in days. Not to work, not to check in with investors, but to write. Emily walked past holding a cup of tea. "What are you typing?" she asked, teasing. "My legacy," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "No, really," he smiled. "Not the business one, the real one." She walked over, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, "Then I want to be part of it." They stood like that for a moment, his hand resting on hers, her forehead against his. And in that moment, Julian understood something he'd missed for years. He hadn't just rebuilt his life. He had built something that would live long after he was gone. Not a skyscraper, not a franchise, not a fortune, but memories, habits, laughter in the kitchen, trust, forgiveness, and love scraped together slowly like clay, molded every day by effort. One weekend, they took a trip to the woods outside the city, Cassanet Park again. But this time, they didn't go to the playground. They found a wide open field near an old oak tree. Julian laid out the picnic blanket. The girls scattered, Lucy collecting leaves, Isla reading under the tree, Nora building a fairy house with twigs. Julian sat beside Emily, the winter sun painting golden patches on her cheeks. "You ever wonder how it might have been if you'd stayed back then?" she asked quietly. Julian looked across the field, thought about it. "Every day," he admitted. She nodded. "But," he continued, "if I hadn't left, maybe I wouldn't have known how much this mattered." Emily looked at him, the wind tugging at her scarf. "I think we found our way," she said. He turned to her fully. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. She tilted her head. "We are walking." "No, I mean, into the next chapter." She laughed, covering her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You idiot," she whispered. "I've been in the story all along." He reached into his coat and pulled out a simple ring. No speech, no kneeling, just truth. She slipped it on without a word, because they didn't need words anymore. They were already home. The wedding wasn't in a church or a ballroom. It happened behind Tress, just like before. This time, though, the girls led the way with white flower crowns. Julian wore a plain suit, no tie, no cufflinks. Emily wore a dress that used to belong to her grandmother. When they exchanged vows, Lucy whispered to Isla, "It's official again." And Isla whispered back, "But this time, it's forever, forever." After the guests left, after the cake was cut and the flowers wilting in their vases, the family sat together on the cafe floor. A pizza box was open between them. They laughed, passed slices, and told stories. Emily leaned on Julian's shoulder, and the girls curled up on their laps. Julian stroked Nora's hair and looked around. And this time, when he whispered, "I'm home," it wasn't about the building. It was about them.
Sometimes life gives us one shot. Sometimes it gives us a second. But the second chance isn't a free pass. It comes with responsibility, with the weight of knowing how close you were to missing everything. Julian Carter walked away once, and the world moved on without him. But he fought his way back.
not with flowers or apologies, but with presence, with pancakes, with bedtime stories, with the choice to stay. Because love isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in moments, in the patience to listen when it's easier to talk, in the courage to show up when it's easier to run, in the quiet mornings and the chaotic evenings. Your legacy isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you build for others. So if you're watching this, and there's someone you walked away from, or someone you haven't called, or something you haven't made right, maybe today's your day. Not to start over, but to continue the story. And maybe, just maybe, it'll lead you home too. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you feel something you weren't expecting, don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories channel for more heartfelt tales every single day. There's a new chapter waiting for you tomorrow. Until then, hold your people close, because that's the story worth telling.